Alright, yo, what is up? Today we're going to be talking about neurons, which are the primary cell transmitting systems for our nervous system. It's how information is transmitted down and how we communicate with all parts of our central nervous system, peripheral nervous system, and the rest of our body. So, that being said, let's just get started with an overview of a neuron and the parts of the neuron. So we've got the cell body, we've got the nucleus, we've got the dendrites, which are these projections over here. We've got the axon, which is a singular slender projection right here. We have the myelin sheaths, which are insulating the axon. We have the nodes of Ranvier, which are allowing for nerve impulses to jump and to speed up propagation. We've got Schwann cells, which form these myelin sheaths. And finally, we've got the axon terminal at the end, which allows for the release of neurotransmitters. Now, a quick side note, if you recall from the neuroglia video, you would understand or realize that this neuron right here is a neuron from the peripheral nervous system. Now, how can we tell? Well, it's because of the Schwann cell down here. If you recall, Schwann cells are neuroglia cells in the peripheral nervous system that form myelin sheaths by wrapping around the axon and forming a myelin sheath. In the central nervous system, we've got oligodendrocytes, which produce myelin sheaths and attach to the axon. That was just a quick side note, but just want to give you all an overview of the structure of a neuron and understand that these are the primary cells of our nervous system and they serve to transmit messages through dendrites and axons. So, starting with the cell body of a neuron is essentially its metabolic center. It contains missile bodies, which are these little granulations right here, these dots all around the cell body, which are granules of rough endoplasmic reticulum, or rough ER, and these are responsible for protein synthesis. With that said, we can now focus on the processes. So, first up, we've got dendrites, and these conduct impulses towards the cell body. If you look at the diagram below, you'll see that these are all dendrites, which I'm circling, and they're kind of these root-like or tree-like projections that serve to get as much information as possible from the surroundings. Now, this will draw information down into the cell body and into the axon, which travels down into the axon terminals. So you will have multiple dendrites, usually, and you will have one axon. Now, this makes sense from a functional point of view because your neurons want to soak up as much information as possible to understand what's going on. So with several outlets, or they can get all this information and condense it into a singular trunk. It's kind of like a funnel system, right? You're getting a lot of information, you're processing it, and you're condensing into a singular trunk, which allows you to be efficient in transmitting your messages. Now, at the axon hillock, which is right over here, your axon will arise and it'll transfer over to the axon terminals. Now, your axon terminals will have vesicles with several different types of neurotransmitters. Now, the point of your axon terminals is to meet at a synapse, which is a junction point between two nerves. So, for example, right here, this whole thing is a synapse. Your axon terminal will communicate with the dendrite. After receiving an action potential, the vesicle will merge with the membrane and release the neurotransmitters out into the synaptic cleft, where dendrite can then pick it up. And then once they get enough of a signal, they'll transmit that all down to the next neuron. Now, that's a whole different topic, which we'll cover, but it is something to keep in mind. But for this video, we're just focusing on the primary structure and function of a nerve. So again, not to go on a tangent, but this whole thing is a synapse. The center point in the middle is a synaptic cleft where neurotransmitters are released and allowed to be picked up by the next dendrite. So the majority of synapses are going to be chemical, with some being electrical. Now, that being said, we will discuss myelin. So we touched on myelin a little before in the neuroglia video, but myelin is this white fatty material that covers, protects, and insulates neuron fibers and axons. And this allows the transmission of a nerve impulse to be sped up and propagated much, much quicker. Now, I know we talked a lot about Schwann cells and oligodendrocytes already, but just to reiterate one more time, Schwann cells wrap around the axons in the peripheral nervous system, and their final layer is this external layer called neurolemma. Oligodendrocytes produce myelin sheets in central nervous system axons, and they don't have the layer of neurolemma. Now, this is the same diagram I used in our neuroglia video, where I was showcasing how impulses utilizing saltatory conduction can jump to node to increase propagation speed. And that's due to the insulation factor of the myelin sheath. So I don't want to spend too much time on that since we've covered it and it's not too complicated. I want to talk more about the sensory receptors and the motor neurons because this is more in relation to how a neuron functions. So we've got two types, sensory receptors and motor neurons. So sensory receptors are, as they sound, they receive sensory information. Now, there are four primary types. We've got thermoreceptors, mechanoreceptors, nociceptors, and proprioceptors. So, your thermoreceptors, mechanoreceptors, and nociceptors are all a part of something called your free nerve endings. Now, these will detect temperature and mechanical stimulus and danger or pain. Now, you have certain types of mechanoreceptors that are a little more specified. These are your corpuscles. So your Messiner's corpuscle will be responsible for feeling light touch, like a small feather touching your palm or a breeze of wind. Anything that's very light and like very, very low sensitivity, you will feel that due to your Messiner's corpuscles. Then for those deeper pressure and vibrational feelings, you'll be feeling that via your lamellar corpuscles. So massages, or if you're using like a Theragun with those vibrations, that's what you'll be feeling with your lamellar corpuscle. So proprioceptors are still a sensory receptor, but they're a little different because they sense when a tissue or muscle is being stretched. So when you're moving or when you're stretching your arm out or you're touching your toes, all of that, those feelings of your muscles being stretched out is due to your proprioceptors. Now we've got two. We've got the Golgi tendon organ and the muscle spindle. Those are primarily where our proprioceptors reside in. Finally, we've got our motor neurons, which are responsible for carrying impulses from the central nervous system to the viscera, muscles, and glands. There are three primary types of neurons. We've got multipolar neurons, bipolar neurons, and unipolar neurons. So multipolar neurons have one axon and many dendrites. Bipolar neurons have one axon and one dendrite. These are very rare in adults. We do have them still. One of the most common areas is our eye, but it's primarily located in our special sense organs. Unipolar neurons are not in humans. These are just one singular axon. We've only found them in invertebrates so far, such as fruit flies. We haven't discovered any in humans. And one thing I forgot to mention are there are these things called interneurons, which connect sensory and motor neurons, and these are functional in things like reflexes and reflex arcs, but they're kind of a junction point that connects sensory and motor neurons, and they're a lot smaller. So, as a recap, I just wanted to put the same diagram as before and see if y'all can identify all the definitions. So, cell body is the metabolic center for your neuron, and it has Nissl bodies, which are these granulations of rough endoplasmic reticulum for protein synthesis. We've got the dendrites, which serve to get information from external sources and transmit it down into the axon, where the axon will jump. Well, in this case, since it's a myelinated neuron, the action potential and nerve impulse, can propagate quicker through the nodes of Ranvier and finally enter your axon terminal, and it'll send information to the other neuron via the axon terminal, releasing neurotransmitters into the dendrite of another neuron. Now, there are four types of your sensory receptors: thermoreceptors, mechanoreceptors, nociceptors, and proprioceptors. Respectively, we have temperature, we have any touch, pain, and muscle stretching. And then for motor neurons, we've got multipolar, bipolar, and unipolar. So multipolar is one axon with many dendrites. Bipolar is one axon with one dendrite. It's rare in adults, but we do see it in our special sense organs. You'll learn a lot about it in the eye. Bipolar neurons play a very significant role in our eye and our vision. And we also have well, we don't have unipolar neurons, but invertebrates have unipolar neurons, which are just one axon with no dendrites. I know that was super quick, and I know it wasn't very detailed, but I just wanted to give you an understanding of how a neuron structure is set up and what it serves to do. I hope that was helpful, but yeah.